Welcome back to Bates Report. For the latest Katie Bates updates and exclusive content, subscribe now and hit the like button. A camera pointed toward a family gathering. Children moving through the background. Decorations carefully arranged. The kind of scene that thousands of people scroll past every single day. And yet, for many longtime followers of Katie Bates, this wasn't ordinary at all. Because hidden beneath the laughter, behind the celebration photos and cheerful social media updates, was something much bigger. A journey. A risk. A decision that had quietly changed the direction of an entire family's future. And now, standing inside a home hundreds of miles away from the life she once knew, Katie Bates appeared to be sharing something fans had been wondering about for months. Was this finally the moment where the dream became real? For years, viewers watched Katie grow up in one of reality television's most recognizable families. They witnessed milestones, relationships, weddings, children, and the countless everyday moments that transformed television personalities into people viewers genuinely felt connected to. But something interesting happens when audiences follow someone's life for that long. The relationship changes. People stop feeling like spectators. They begin feeling invested. Every move matters. Every decision sparks discussion. Every photo gets analyzed. And when rumors started circulating that Katie and Travis were building a new chapter far from their previous routine, curiosity exploded almost instantly. Why Texas? Why now? And perhaps most importantly, what did this move really mean for their future? The answers didn't arrive all at once. Instead, they came through tiny clues. A comment here. A photograph there. A subtle detail noticed by eagle-eyed followers who have spent years paying attention to every update. At first, many people assumed the speculation was exaggerated. After all, internet rumors have a habit of growing larger than reality. But as weeks turned into months, the evidence became harder to ignore. Something significant was happening. And now, as Katie shares special moments from what appears to be a deeply personal home celebration, fans believe they're witnessing the culmination of a dream that has been quietly unfolding behind the scenes for a very long time. What makes this story especially fascinating isn't simply the house itself. It's what the house represents. Because homes are rarely just buildings. They're symbols. They're statements. They're reflections of priorities, values, sacrifices, and hopes for the future. Every family that purchases a home understands this feeling. The excitement. The anxiety. The endless planning. The late-night conversations. The uncertainty of wondering whether you've made the right choice. And when that process plays out under the watchful eyes of thousands of followers, the pressure becomes something entirely different. Suddenly, personal decisions become public conversations. Private milestones become community events. And celebrations become stories. That's exactly what appears to be happening here. As images and videos from the celebration began circulating, viewers immediately noticed something different about Katie's demeanor. There was a sense of comfort. A sense of accomplishment. The kind of expression people often wear when they've crossed a finish line after a very long race. But what race had she actually finished? To understand why this moment matters so much to supporters, we need to go back. Back before the celebration. Back before the excitement. Back before Texas became the center of the conversation. Because the roots of this story stretch much deeper than a simple relocation. They reach into questions about family, identity, independence, and what happens when someone chooses to build a future that looks different from the one they always expected. And that's where things become far more interesting. Because according to many longtime observers, this move wasn't merely about changing addresses. It may have represented something far more personal. A turning point. A declaration. A new beginning. One that carried emotional weight far beyond real estate. As excitement surrounding the celebration continued growing online, another question quietly emerged. Were fans only seeing the happy ending? Or were there parts of this journey they still didn't know? Because major life changes rarely happen without challenges. Every dream has obstacles. Every milestone has moments of doubt. Every success story has chapters that never make it into the photographs. And if that's true here, then the most compelling parts of this story may still be waiting to be uncovered. The more people talked about the celebration, the more another realization began to settle in. This wasn't simply a story about a new house. It was a story about change. And change, especially when it involves someone audiences have watched for years, always carries a deeper emotional layer. Because viewers don't just follow events. They follow evolution. They remember where someone started. They remember the younger version of the person they see today. And for many longtime followers, that's exactly what made this moment feel so significant. The Katie many people first came to know was part of a large, close-knit family whose daily life unfolded in front of cameras and audiences alike. Family gatherings weren't occasional events, they were a way of life. Milestones were shared. Celebrations were communal. Support systems were visible. That environment became part of the public identity people associated with her. So whenever major life decisions emerged, particularly ones involving distance, independence, or relocation, audiences naturally paid attention. Not because they were interested in property values or moving trucks. Because they were interested in what those decisions meant. And that's where Texas entered the picture. Long before any celebration photos appeared, conversations had already been quietly building online. Some followers noticed subtle references. Others pointed to changing routines. A few began connecting details that seemed unrelated at first glance. Individually, none of the clues appeared especially dramatic. Together, however, they painted a picture that suggested something much larger might be taking shape. The speculation grew. Not explosively. Not overnight. But steadily. And sometimes steady curiosity becomes more powerful than sudden controversy. Because it lingers. It grows. It invites people to keep searching for answers. Every update seemed to generate new questions. Every appearance sparked fresh discussions. What exactly were they planning? How permanent was the move? Would this become their long-term future? Or was it simply a temporary chapter? The fascinating thing about public curiosity is that it often reveals something deeper about the audience itself. Many of the people following this journey weren't merely interested in Katie's story. They were seeing pieces of their own lives reflected in it. Young couples trying to build stability. Parents making decisions for their children. Families weighing opportunity against familiarity. People wondering whether taking a risk could eventually lead somewhere better. Those are universal experiences. And perhaps that's why the story resonated so strongly. Because beneath the headlines and social media discussions, it touched on something almost everyone understands. The fear of stepping into the unknown. At first glance, moving sounds exciting. Fresh opportunities. New surroundings. A chance to start over. But anyone who has actually done it knows a different reality exists behind the excitement. There are difficult conversations. Unexpected expenses. Moments of uncertainty. Questions without immediate answers. Leaving behind familiar routines isn't easy. Neither is creating entirely new ones. And while followers only saw selected moments of the process, many suspected there were countless unseen challenges occurring behind the scenes. That's what made the celebration feel meaningful. Because celebrations are rarely about the day itself. They're about everything that came before it. Every obstacle. Every stressful moment. Every difficult decision. Every leap of faith. all compressed into a single moment where people finally allow themselves to breathe. And judging by the reaction online, many viewers believed that's exactly what they were witnessing. A family finally exhaling. A dream finally becoming tangible. A chapter finally becoming reality. Yet there was another aspect of the story attracting attention. One that had little to do with walls, floors, or square footage. It involved identity. For years, Katie and Travis had built a public image centered around family life, personal growth, and shared experiences. Audiences watched them navigate marriage. They watched them embrace parenthood. They watched them transition from one phase of life into another. Each stage brought new responsibilities, new expectations, new priorities. And somewhere along the way, many followers began noticing a subtle transformation. Not dramatic, not sudden, but noticeable. They seemed increasingly focused on building something uniquely their own. A life that reflected their personal goals rather than simply continuing established patterns. For some viewers, that evolution felt inspiring. For others, it sparked questions. And whenever public figures make significant life changes, those mixed reactions are almost inevitable. Supporters celebrated the independence. Critics questioned the decisions. Observers analyzed every detail. The conversation expanded far beyond the move itself. People debated what it represented. Some saw ambition. Others saw practicality. Many saw both. Meanwhile, the family continued moving forward. And perhaps that's what made the situation particularly compelling. Despite the constant speculation, the actual story remained remarkably simple. Two people building a future. A family creating a home. A dream progressing one step at a time. Yet simple stories often become powerful because they tap into emotions everyone understands. Security. Belonging. Hope. Those emotions appeared everywhere as discussions surrounding the celebration intensified. Comments poured in from supporters expressing excitement. Others reflected on their own experiences purchasing homes. Many shared memories of similar milestones in their own lives. And suddenly, what started as a personal family event became something larger. A collective moment. A shared experience. The internet can often feel divided. Arguments dominate headlines. Controversies attract attention. But every once in a while, a story emerges that reminds people of something universal. The desire to create a place where loved ones feel safe. The desire to build stability. The desire to look around one day and realize that the future you've been working toward is finally standing right in front of you. That sentiment seemed to resonate deeply. Still, beneath the excitement, another layer of curiosity continued growing. Because some followers believed the move itself was only part of a much larger transformation. They pointed to shifting priorities, changing routines, new opportunities, emerging possibilities. And they wondered whether this home represented more than a destination. What if it was a starting point? What if the celebration wasn't marking the end of a journey, but the beginning of an entirely new one? That possibility generated an entirely different kind of intrigue. Because beginnings are unpredictable. No one knows exactly what comes next. Not the audience. Not the commentators. Not even the people living the story. And that's precisely what keeps viewers invested. The unanswered questions. The unwritten chapters. The sense that something important may still be unfolding. As excitement surrounding the Texas home continued spreading across social media, followers started looking beyond the celebration itself. They began focusing on the future. What opportunities might this new location create? How might family life evolve? Could new professional ventures emerge? Would this decision influence other aspects of their lives? Or would the biggest changes be the ones nobody expected? Those questions remained unanswered. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The celebration wasn't ending the conversation. It was expanding it. And as more details emerged, people began realizing there may have been far more planning, sacrifice, and emotional investment behind this move than anyone originally imagined. What looked like a simple celebration on the surface was beginning to reveal itself as something much deeper. A story about growth. A story about risk. A story about building a future one decision at a time. And perhaps most importantly, a story whose most revealing chapters may not have happened yet. By the time the excitement surrounding the celebration reached its peak, something unusual had started happening. People were no longer talking only about the home. They were talking about the journey. And in many ways, that's when the story became far more powerful. Because anyone can admire a finished result. What truly captures attention is understanding what it took to get there. The sacrifices. The uncertainty. The moments when success was far from guaranteed. Those are the details that transform a milestone into a story. And while only Katie and those closest to her know every private conversation that led to this chapter, longtime followers have spent years watching enough of her life to recognize a pattern. Growth rarely happens without discomfort. Every major transition brings challenges. Every new beginning requires leaving something behind. That's the part people don't often see in celebration photos. The quiet moments before the excitement. The nights spent weighing options. The difficult decisions that happen long before anyone announces them publicly. When viewers look at a smiling family standing inside a new home, they're seeing the final scene. They're not seeing the hundreds of smaller scenes that came before it. The paperwork. The planning. The stress. The logistics. The endless list of responsibilities that accompany a move, especially one involving an entirely different state. And that's what made many supporters feel emotionally connected to this milestone. Because they knew it wasn't simply a purchase. It was a process. A long one. A complicated one. And perhaps, at times, an exhausting one. Yet there was another factor that continued drawing attention. Family. No matter how far someone moves, family remains one of the most emotionally powerful aspects of any major life change. For years, audiences had associated Katie's life with proximity to loved ones. Family gatherings. Celebrations. Shared traditions. Spontaneous visits. Those moments became familiar to viewers. So naturally, when Texas became part of the picture, many people began asking questions. How would distance affect those relationships? Would visits become less frequent? Would traditions change? Would important moments become harder to share? These weren't criticisms. They were genuine questions rooted in something audiences had witnessed for years. The importance of family connections. And perhaps that's why the celebration carried such emotional weight. Because it seemed to offer an answer. Not a direct answer. Not a spoken answer. But a visual one. The atmosphere surrounding the celebration suggested that this wasn't a story about separation. It was a story about expansion. A family growing. A new chapter being added rather than an old one being erased. That's a distinction many supporters found comforting. Because moving forward doesn't necessarily mean leaving everything behind. Sometimes it means carrying the most important parts of your past into a different future. And that idea appeared to resonate strongly among followers. Still, the deeper people looked, the more fascinating the timeline became. Major life transitions rarely occur in isolation. They're usually connected to larger changes happening simultaneously. Career developments. Parenting responsibilities. Personal goals. Financial planning. Long-term visions for the future. Like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. Many observers began viewing the move through that lens. Not as a single decision, but as part of a broader strategy. A deliberate effort to shape the next stage of life. And whether those assumptions were entirely accurate or not, they reflected something important. People sensed intentionality. They sensed purpose. They sensed that this wasn't an impulsive choice. It appeared thoughtful. Carefully considered. Built around long-term priorities. That perception only increased interest. Because audiences tend to become invested when they believe they're witnessing a meaningful turning point. And for many, this certainly felt like one. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. A new state. A new home. New routines. New opportunities. A different environment for raising children. A different pace of life. Potentially different possibilities. Every one of those elements carried significance. Especially for followers who had watched earlier stages of the journey unfold. But perhaps the most interesting aspect wasn't what changed. It was what remained consistent. Through every update, every transition, every conversation, one theme appeared repeatedly. Family remained at the center. Not the house. Not the location. Not the headlines. Family. And that's likely why the story connected with so many people. Because beneath all the speculation and discussion, the core message felt familiar. People work hard to create stability for the people they love. They make difficult decisions. They accept uncertainty. They take risks. Not because change itself is exciting, but because they believe the future might be better on the other side of that change. That's a story millions of people understand. It's not exclusive to television personalities. It's not exclusive to public figures. It's universal. And universal stories often become the most compelling. Meanwhile, social media continued doing what social media always does. Analyzing. Discussing. Speculating. Celebrating. Some comments focused on the home's appearance. Others focused on the family's happiness. Many focused on what might come next. Because whenever one chapter closes, curiosity naturally shifts toward the next one. And there was no shortage of theories. Some believed the move would create entirely new opportunities. Others predicted significant changes in future projects. A few wondered whether Texas would become the setting for an even larger transformation that had not yet been revealed publicly. No one knew for certain. And that uncertainty became part of the intrigue. The unknown often attracts more attention than the known. People aren't captivated by completed stories. They're captivated by stories still unfolding. And that's exactly where this narrative seemed to be heading. Toward something unfinished. Toward possibilities rather than conclusions. Toward a future that remained unwritten. As days passed, the celebration itself gradually became less important than what it represented. The photographs were memorable. The videos were meaningful. The smiles were genuine. But they all pointed toward a larger idea. A milestone reached. A dream realized. A foundation established. And foundations are interesting because they're never the final goal. They're the beginning of whatever comes next. That's why some of the most attentive followers weren't focused on the celebration at all. They were focused on the future. They were asking a different question. Not what happened, but what happens now. Because once the moving boxes are unpacked, once the decorations are placed, once the excitement settles, real life begins. New routines form. New memories are created. New challenges emerge. And sometimes, entirely unexpected opportunities appear. The celebration may have marked the completion of one dream. But it may also have quietly marked the start of another. A larger one. A more ambitious one. Perhaps one that even the audience hasn't fully recognized yet. And if that's true, then the Texas dream everyone is talking about today may eventually be remembered for something far bigger than a house. It may be remembered as the moment an entirely new chapter officially began. A chapter whose biggest surprises were still waiting just around the corner,